Okay, so Skyrim comes out November 11th. Reiner, what are you looking forward to most when you finally get to play it?
Just kind of exploring the open world and doing my own thing. Taking a villager down to the river, shouting an ice spell at them, watching them float down the river, and I'll call that a day.
There was that sense in Oblivion, right, where as soon as you come out of the sewers, there's just that kind of like overwhelming, like, oh no, like where do I even go? Because there are so many different places you can explore. Is that something that you're looking forward to in Skyrim, or are you hoping maybe it's a little more directed?
I'm hoping it's even more open than it was before, and I think the new storytelling system will allow that with the way that everything kind of branches off of each other now. They haven't shown us anything with the story really, the critical path or anything. They haven't shown us the intro, which is weird because every Bethesda game released so far from that studio has started with, the first thing we saw was like coming out of the dungeon in Oblivion, coming out of the vault in Fallout. For some reason, they're not showing us this intro. So I'm a little worried. Maybe they're saving it for us. Like it's like maybe going to be one of the best parts, but what if it's something that didn't improve since Oblivion? What if it still looks old and they just don't want to show that?
The one thing that we know for sure is that like all of these Elder Scrolls games basically start with you as like a prisoner breaking out. So we know that you're going to be a prisoner. But yeah, like when I was out at Bethesda Studio and started playing, they started me, what they'd said was about an hour into the game. So like after all of that intro sequence, I basically started at that moment where you just like first emerge out there. For me, it was a very similar feeling as it was in Oblivion, where it's just like that kind of overwhelming thing. But I, like you, sort of enjoy that, like all the possibilities.
Now you got to play the game for 3 hours. You just went out to Bethesda, you wrote an article in the newest issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, I spent a lot of my time really trying to get into the Dark Brotherhood, like into the Assassin's Guild, because that was the thing that, like that was the quest line in the original one that I just, or in the original,
in Oblivion.
In Oblivion, yeah, that I just loved the most. So, but it turns out that like on my way to try and do that, I encountered a lot of other like little side quests and things you can do along the way. So in some of those cases, I stopped and like helped someone out or talked to, explored the town a little bit. And in other cases, I sort of like made a beeline towards the objective so I could, like progress with the story. But yeah, I mean, in that playthrough, the critical path was turned off. So the only thing I could do was sort of that side content.
See, I'm probably a horrible person because in all the Elder Scrolls games I've played, I know they spend hundreds of hours probably writing these fake books and crafting the story. I could not care less about the story in any of those games. I mean, it's a series of like, oh, I guess I have to go here to get things moving along and everything like that. But I mean, as far as like Martin turning into a dragon and Oblivion, I don't care about that. If anything else, it just reminded me of like how the technology wasn't up to their ambition. Remember when you finally assemble this army and it's like 3 guys marching down a hill. So it's like those moments aren't what engross me in the Elder Scrolls games. It's just dinking around and exploring and finding my own thing.
Yeah. So Jeff, what would you say is the one is, as someone who played Oblivion, what would you say is the thing in Skyrim that you're maybe hoping has been addressed, or like a complaint from Oblivion that you're hoping is better this time around?
Oh, that's easy. I hope that dungeons don't feel identical to one another, because I think that's why in my opinion, I think Morrowind is just a better game. I enjoyed that world a little more than I enjoyed Oblivion. Oblivion is more polished and it looks better and everything, but I think that I just enjoyed finding a place in Morrowind and you felt like a dungeon had a story behind it, that you could kind of find like notes. You're like, oh, this was an archaeological dig gone horribly wrong or something. And whereas in Oblivion, it was kind of like they're all basically the same type of architecture. You kind of come across the same types of enemies. I don't know, it just didn't feel as satisfying to me.
It's either a cave or an old elven ruin or something, and then you just sort of get to the end. I wish I could allay your concerns a little bit on that. It's not that I think it's bad, I just didn't get much of a chance to dive into that when I was there. So.
And this is probably like a weird thing to kind of, I think it's strange that you can't repair your gear.
Oh, really?
Like your armor and your weapons don't degrade over time, and I always enjoyed that moment where you find a quiet spot and you hear the ting 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 ting, and the numbers going up. That part's been stripped from the game, which is strange.
Oh man, like I love that that's gone. I hate upkeep like that.
Really?
Well, I was talking to Todd Howard about that while I was up there, because like the idea in previous games is like, okay, like you get a brand new sword and let's say it has an attack power of like 50. And then as you use it, it degrades. It's like it's a subtractive thing, that the sword is really good when you get it, and it gets worse. Whereas their approach to it with this one now, that I as a gamer enjoy more, is that you get it and it always just retains that baseline functionality, but their crafting system, like the weaponsmithing and stuff, is focused on making your stuff better, on making improvements and making them better, rather than restoring it to functionality that you feel like you're entitled to in the first place.
See, I like the repairing system, but I've always hated it in games where you could be over encumbered. So if you're walking around with like really nice heavy armor and like a big bastard sword or something like that, like that's all you can really carry. So once that breaks down, you're kind of screwed. But if you have unlimited inventory space, I'm all about it, where you can have maybe 15 swords if you want them.
Yeah, yeah.
But in Skyrim's case, I'm in Joe's camp, where I think it's going to make a better experience and it won't be as frustrating as in Oblivion, moments where you're in a dungeon fighting and then it breaks and you're like, well, I got to leave.
Yeah.
You know, like I have nothing else to use.
Or I have to use this like rusty iron dagger that's going to take like 50 more hits on a dude to take him out.
So what kind of class are you guys going to play as, or how are you going to play?
Normally in this sort of like fantasy RPGs, I like to play spellcasting classes, but there's something about the way they handle those in Elder Scrolls, which is sort of like it's focused a lot more on like aiming and things like that. And I kind of like I like spellcasting in games like Dragon Age, where it's a little more tactical and less sort of reflex based, I guess.
Okay.
With my time with Skyrim, I played like a sneaky class, and I really enjoyed that. So I'm probably going to dive into that a little bit more, focusing on like one-handed weapons and stealth and that kind of thing.
I think I'm going to roll awesome and then kind of turn into a badass hybrid. That's usually how I play.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, actually, it is interesting to point out though that they did do away with the class system, so you don't actually like say like I am a thief or a knight dagger or whatever those.
That's good, because then you don't feel as corny when you become the head of every possible guild.
Right,
which is
right.
kind of stupid.
It's like, yeah, I'm a thief, but I'm also the best mage in town.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really like, they don't name the classes, you just sort of determine the classes by what you do and how you allocate like the skill points that you have.
Okay, so my class will be being over encumbered and getting slaughtered by will-o-wisps.
So you're going to be a JeffCork.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
The berry picker.
The berry picker, exactly. Come here, you little beauty. Yes, Manus! I'm looking forward to seeing how, maybe in a way, I kind of hope that they didn't improve the ragdolls, because I loved watching the bears fall over on hills in Oblivion, because it was like the coolest thing.
So obviously, there's been tough bosses and creatures in the world before, but the big one in this is killing dragons. And in the videos I've seen, in the presentations that Todd's done, it looks absolutely incredible. What are you guys' thoughts on that and battling these kind of legendary beasts?
I'm looking forward to it. I guess I'd say I haven't, based on previous Elder Scrolls games, I don't know that they've really demonstrated a great aptitude for boss fights so far. Like the way their game is like this, and it makes it sound like I'm bad-mouthing the studio. Obviously I'm not. I just don't think that that's one of the areas of their of strength in the series. It's really more about like the open world and the customization and like you sort of building up this character that you want. But yeah, when it comes to these big like climactic encounters, that, at least in Morrowind and Oblivion, that's not something I saw delivered, on the scale of what they're trying to do with dragons.
So they look like lengthy fights too.
Yeah, I guess the best way to sum up my thoughts is like I'm really looking forward to seeing how that pans out, because like if they do it right, that could be awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to like seeing something huge on the horizon and being like the mammoths and like the giants, just seeing like something that's more than like a minotaur or something, which, and I think in Oblivion that was about as big as it got, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think what they're going to bring is that unknown factor, where games are usually like, these monsters are in this zone, these monsters are in this zone, but these things can kind of fly around. They can dive bomb cities, they can burn up cities. That's cool. So just having that element of never really knowing where these things are, I think is going to be very cool.
In the few hours that I spent with the game, that wasn't active yet. And they explained that there's something tied to story progression as to whether or not like the dragons are actually like out in the world and sort of for you to be able to encounter and fight. So there's got to be something that you do that sort of riles them up and gets them angry.
If nothing else, just the possibility that you could go stumble on a dragon's lair, like you might find an abandoned tomb or something, and you just knowing that it would be possible. Whereas before, you know that you're really not going to run into anything that epic.
It's the kind of thing that we've sort of lost, I feel like, in a lot of modern role-playing games that have a sort of linear progression from like one area to a dungeon to the next area to the next hub or whatever. I think back to the original Final Fantasy on NES, and there was like some ice cave that you could go into before you really should be in there. And there are a few places like this. You could stumble into places that you shouldn't be, and then you just get destroyed instantaneously. Now, I don't want a game that's totally built on just punishing you all the time. Reiner, I know you love Dark Souls, but at the same time, I do like the idea that you're also not just being shepherded through the game either. That there is an opportunity for danger and for you to sort of like bite off more than you can chew at some point.
Yeah, I'll sound like a broken record. I think that's what Morrowind did really well in conveying that kind of feeling where you go, oh God, I'm clearly out of my league here. I'll remember where this is and I'll go back to it.
Yeah.
And that's a large part of what Elder Scrolls is making your own story and going through it. Yes, I want this game to have a story on the scale of Mass Effect or BioShock or something where we can really care about it, and maybe the characters of like Uncharted, but at the same time, like just in the brief time I played it for an hour. Joe, 3 hours, like I was already shaping my own story in that, and I didn't even care if there was anything attached to it.
Yeah, that's how I've always played the game.
So I wonder how far you can go into this without really activating anything.
This is a series too where if I can pull up a map and see all the points of interest, I have a really hard time not doing all the side quests and exploring all the areas. So it'll say like, you need to go here, here's the critical path, and it's like, I'll get to this part later, and I think that a lot of people play the game that way too.
And I like games that very clearly handle things like that, like The Elder Scrolls does it, Assassin's Creed does it. We're sort of letting you know that like, hey, when you're ready to go forward, this is where you go, but in the meantime, we're going to give you a lot of content that you can sort of explore at your leisure also.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to play that game.
I'm going to play it so hard.
Gross.